The Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, or CMMC program, is meant to improve the network security of defense contractors. But following an internal review, the Pentagon is making changes and rolling out version 2.0. Ron Marks is a former CIA official and former intelligence advisor to 2 Senate Majority Leaders. Currently, he's president of ZPN National Security and Cyber Strategies. Ron, nice to see you again.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
So what was wrong with the first version of this?
I remember watching a movie called Amadeus one time, and it was about Mozart. And I remember the king walking up to him at one point and saying that the song had too many notes. And I think that's what happened, is that there were so many moving parts to that were so large and so, I'm going to use the word intrusive, but involving so many companies, so much training, so many individuals who were getting not contrary orders, but other orders from other parts of the government. That it was confusing. So I think a good, strategic retreat may be the best way of saying it at this point, but bringing it back, thinking about where you want to go, trying to match it off with other parts of the government. Energy Department, for instance, also has something like this. And try to think about the smaller companies too. And I think there are a lot of complaints, so I think it's very smart to pull back.
Has this thing been problematic from the start? I mean, are you surprised that there's been this strategic pullback?
I'm trying not to smile. The answer is unfortunately yes. You know, it was the best of intentions, and you know how the road to hell is paved with those. And I think what happened was people were so concerned over internal threat. They were so concerned over the size of the military industrial base. I mean, let's face it, defense industrial base is huge. So hundreds of thousands of companies. The potential leakage in there has been strong. The Chinese have been exploiting that, and not just big companies, but medium-sized and small companies. So I thought, and Katie Arrington, these people going ahead in terms of that was not a good idea. Was a good idea. It was essentially the rollout, I think, in a lot of ways. You were training, and you were getting companies first who were going to train inspectors. Then the inspectors were going to go out and inspect, and it wasn't clear in terms of their inspection, for instance, how they would apply the 5 levels that they were talking about in terms of evaluation. It had a lot of creaking parts to it, and what you started to hear fairly quickly, in fact, were companies starting to say, well, wait a minute, what are we doing here? Where are we going? And then, of course, a lot of people, and this is something DOD couldn't control, a lot of people were simply out there promoting themselves as, we're now capable of making these judgments. Here we are, don't forget us. And I think that just made everything awkward, and you could hear the rumbling, the roaring, just underneath in the industry saying, this is not good.
All right, so outline for us the major changes then that you think we'll see here.
Well, I think you've already seen they're going to pull back in terms of number of levels. I think they're going to do 3 levels at this point. I don't know whether they have not gotten rid of the training group. They are certainly at this point looking at what kind of training that is, the kind of people that should be going forward. I think they've sent the word to the companies at this point, or certainly they've said it in the press, that look, we're going to be looking at a smaller group of firms. Those are involved with more sensitive material, so it's not just everybody who's got a defense contract, but in fact a much narrower group. They're going to try for smaller companies, I think, to take into some consideration a little bit of self-criticism, self-review for the first time around. And get away with that. So it's really much narrower at this point. It's much more focused. And again, from the standpoint of smaller companies, and I've got to tell you, I advise enough of them at this point, the cost of this thing beforehand, nobody knew, and which frightened them because it's coming off their bottom line. So I think this is a much easier, wiser approach. I can tell that we're beginning to slip it about a year at this point. And certainly in terms of the contracts, they're not going to apply to the contracts, I think, until 25.
So you like these changes. Are they enough, though? Is this going to accomplish what it needs to accomplish, which is keeping these networks secure?
I don't think it will when it's all said and done. I would rather see them coordinate with, Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency. I think DCSA at this point has got a fairly robust program in terms of internal threat. I understand why they wanted to go ahead with this kind of review. But I still think when it's all said and done, by setting standards and applying those standards across the board within DOD, not confusing people necessarily with several different groups coming at them, I think that's fairer to the companies, I think. But we'll see. Again, it's about a year off, and then we'll see if they're going to modify. In the meantime, there are corporate comments coming yet, so that's still yet to change the game.
So, Ron, obviously there's a lot going on with cybersecurity across the government, and there's a lot of different standards and guidelines coming out. Is there coordination going on so that companies know what to do and what's going to be required of them?
I sense that you're starting to see some of it, and I think one of the reasons, if I had to look at the atmospherics of this, that you saw the pullback on CMMC is in fact just that, which is you're now getting people who are beginning to look around and say, well, wait a minute, and that's just a general atmosphere. You know, I have endless faith in Chris Inglis and the idea of a national cyber director, and one of the points of that position, in fact, was something like this, which is let's re-examine what we're doing, what we're asking for from these companies, because they're getting hit up not only if they have other business in the private sector, they've got CISA, they've got DOD, they've got parts of DOD, they've also got a Security Exchange Commission now, Justice Department, you know, all these different parts of the government are poking at them, and you know, they want to be responsible. I think for the most part, I don't see people for the most part not wanting to do that. But the question is, who's in charge here, and what do you want? What do you want us to do? And if Chris can deliver that message, and you know, get something across the board that makes sense, and he seems to have the budget and the program. I was listening to your interview, in fact, and I thought to myself, okay, you got budget, you got program, which in this little poker game that we play around town means you get to talk. It means you get to some extent, make things stick. So we may not see it this year, but again, I was looking at that CMMC, they're going to kick it off a year. And I think that gives him a chance to get some budget and people in there to begin that process of coordination.
Okay, well, we've got a year to see what happens.
Oops.
Ron, thanks so much for being on the program.
Thank you very much.